Well, I appreciate y'all coming in from this sunny day in Georgia. We promised to drop some knowledge on you and with you. And I warn you that I may call on some of you. I may be like, hey, guy in the hat. That might not narrow it down, but hey, so-and-so, do you have a passion for a kind of sport or something like that? So it'll be easy questions, but just to illustrate some things about some of the different tips that I'm going to give, because my topic today is called Cross-Training Your Business Brain. And so one of the things I do is I majored in communications, but my minor was business. We called it a cognate in business in college, and to make sure I was proficient on the accounting and the research and the things, so I could talk fluently with my marketing colleagues at companies. And in PR, we sell our services to folks who are in corporate communications, but also to the CMO a lot of the time. Because the corporate communications folks very often know the things from press releases and press conferences and talking to media, talking to influencers, but the CMO may be the kind of person who will greenlight an augmented reality campaign, a virtual reality campaign, a multi-city marketing lead generation campaign, and the like. So we really like as PR people to elevate our game to make sure that we don't do the things that people just traditionally thought PR did, but that we blow our minds with all the elements of marketing. And so I know marketing is probably a part of almost everybody's life, either marketing yourself or the companies or organizations you may want to work for, or even some of you do programming and the support behind all the technology that makes companies thrive. So hopefully within there we'll have a lot. I'll definitely be open to your questions as we go. And without further ado, cross-training your business brain. I mentioned that public relations has had a long history of doing two things. You think of a company that needs PR, and it's not just like the lady from Scandal showing up, but the PR people may want to make the faucet turn on. It's like, we've got a new car, we've got a new fashion line, we've got a new product, and we want to turn the faucet on so that everybody starts talking about it. Or we might have an oil spill or a CEO in hot water or that sort of thing, and we're looking to turn the faucet off. So a lot of people think about PR as publicity, and they think about brand reputation in that terms. Well, we've taken all of that, and we still do those things for sure. We've sort of taken it to a new level in our firm, because we like to think of ourselves as integrated marketers. So when you look at this tells you a little bit more about what we're doing nowadays, and it's based on the business objectives for companies, where in the middle of our integrated marketing model, we're doing social listening. We're listening to what the marketplace is saying, what our audiences are caring about. We're formulating different facts that we find into insights. So basically facts that you know put together in different orders can make what's called an insight or a creative insight. And feel free, we got some spaces down here for anybody coming in. So that's one of the things a lot of people will ask you in business is, do you have some insights that are interesting? And it wouldn't be that the sky is blue or that the wagons are red, but it might be like, wow, when you take a red wagon and you put it under a blue sky, it makes a reflection that shows off a strange shade of purple. So it's one of those things where you add the pieces up and try to describe something in a new way that's an insight, because then you can act on those insights with a big strategy that's going to take your business forward. And that strategy is sort of your roadmap. We take a strategy and we put a calendar against it. So those of you who are very organized that way, you're going to be great at creating the cadence calendars of marketing. And cadence is one of those military terms where it's like you're going to do this and you're going to do this and you're going to do this. And so that's what we do a lot, is create a cadence calendar. In PR, we're often creating content and conversation so that people will start talking about our brands or not talking about aspects of our brands, whatever it might be, to get folks to be interested. And that content and conversation leads to conversion and measurement. So we can tell that so-and-so people have engaged, that there's this pass-along value. And our business-to-business clients in particular like to know, hey, did you make the phone ring? Did you make the emails go off? Did we get sales out of it? Because all the things that we might do in communications and marketing are only so good if ultimately they made the sale. And so you've got people asking you those kind of questions now, whereas in the past it might have just been like, well, you did this really nice or cute campaign and I'm glad that was good for you, but in reality I want to know, did I sell thousands of the car? Did I sell millions of the hairbrush? Did I do that? And so all of that adds up in the middle. Now, I'm not sure how many of you have heard of the term, not in terms of Mexican currency, but the term peso as it refers to marketing. Is this a term that is permeated? Okay, good. Well, I'll tell you a little bit about peso. Peso is an acronym that we use in the integrated marketing world that means paid, earned, shared, and owned. So paid is the part of the marketing mix where you're buying it. You're basically putting digital ads in place. You're buying advertorials. You're buying billboards. You're doing that. And the interesting thing is a lot of people don't think PR does this, but PR now does all of these things. So we do the paid content strategy to reach our audiences. Earned is what I talked about earlier, where it's getting influencers or media or government officials or other folks to sort of do what you want for no pay. So basically the PR person is paid, but basically there's no money exchanged for getting the person to talk about you. The only exception to that rule is influencers, who you might find get paid quite heftily in some cases for things. We have one lady in Atlanta that I think charges $1,500 an Instagram post if you're going to have her talk about your restaurant and take a picture of it. So that might be very lucrative for Kim here, who has a food blog. Shared social strategy. Shared is basically borrowing the equity of social channels, where you've got your brand on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and YouTube and Pinterest and the like. And those people could change their algorithms. They could change the rules any day. But you're still borrowing off the equity of that to be able to get their consumers to follow your brand on those places. So if Facebook got sued so much by the government tomorrow and had to close its doors, there'd be a lot of businesses that are doing a lot of work to sell things on Facebook and to share things on Facebook that that shared channel would dry up and you'd be trying a different one. The good news is all those channels are thriving right now. Many of you are part of the Instagram generation, and your kids will be doing something else and think that you're super old for doing Instagram still. And then owned strategy is basically like your websites, your apps, your intranets, the things that you as a company own that you could control as media vehicles for yourself. So the funny thing is we used to rely on the local newspaper, the TV channels, the magazines, and that sort of thing to do all the talking for us. But now, once we've actually activated on the paid, earned, shared, and owned places, we're our own publishers and we're our own interactors with different folks. So that was a little bit, that's the headiest I go. The rest is a lot less heady, but I definitely wanted to make sure that you knew that PR is a lot more sophisticated than maybe you'd heard before. Some of the things that we do in an average day are everything from getting stories in the Wall Street Journal to creating experiences. And these are pictures of something we did for a lending company called Lightstream, where we created something called the Forest of Dreams in Times Square recently. And basically because there were paperless lending, we planted trees for each person that checked out our loans and had people walk through the forest to be able to learn more about the product. So sometimes you're experientially bringing something to life and creating the social and engagement pieces of that. So many of you are in college, and so I thought I would start there because that's the easiest way to understand how someone's career journey went or is going. It's a work in progress all the time. But I mentioned University of South Carolina, and one of the things that I found really useful about the college experience, certainly the classes, and certainly my professors would all be glad to say how important writing is, and that writing is important for anybody in business, and so are analytics and measurement and data, as my current professors tell me. But the extracurricular activities were really important to me in shaping the way I've approached my career. So we had the campus newspaper, campus programming board, student government, and all those things actually to this day still affect the way I approach certain things in life and in work. So school was great. For me, I got several internships while in school, and on some of those, one I did really well with, and I felt like I pushed myself in and was very interested and got a lot of examples out of. And the other one I would say I kind of phoned in, honestly. Back then there was something where every day they'd make me Xerox news clippings and take them around to executives, and I thought it was the most boring task, and now a computer program would have just done that in seconds. seconds and spit you out an HTML on it. But at the time, what I realized is what I should have done is I should have taken that opportunity where I'm just delivering these clips to people and taken a chance to learn more about their business and take every opportunity you've ever got with the executives to really learn more and see of like, hey, maybe there's something extracurricular I could do beyond this 20 hours a week of marginally paid handing out clippings to people. And because my other one, I got to help name an arena, and I got to help do a whole campaign for a consumer company and all these other things. So I kind of knew that that's the one I wanted to work at right after school. Well, I fast forward a couple years later to living in Atlanta, and got my job at Ketchum in Atlanta, which is one of those global firms that has in a lot of cities. In fact, one of your classmates interviewed there last week, which is very cool. And I still think it's a great firm. And so I'm kind of an agency lifer. I describe sometimes if you get into the ad or PR business, it's like being a gypsy or a Jedi, where they just tell you all these things that you do, and then you do it the rest of your life. And if you wanted to go back into this career, you probably wouldn't do it. So in other words, if you got a corporate job, you probably would never go back to an agency job. But a lot of people in corporate jobs wish you had agency experience, because they're used to seeing how you have the variety of clients and you can change from one thing to the next all the time. So it's an ultimate shape-shifting role. So as an agency lifer, I went from Ketchum to a firm called MSL. I did a brief tour of duty at a digital agency called Macquarium, not to be confused with the aquarium, but think of an aquarium full of Macs and computers everywhere, where we did corporate portals and e-learning and all sorts of things like that. Then found my way into Burson, Cohen & Wolfe, where I ran their office. And on one fateful day, Carol Cookerly, who runs my firm now, asked me if she could steal me away and help her run the firm at Cookerly PR. And I said yes, and by the following day, I was innovation officer and trying to do my best to brainstorm. But I look back at the internship that I was successful with, that was me looking intellectually curious with my bosses about, oh, what is that tournament ball for the Final Four that you're putting together here, and how could we get that out to more people, and what could we do to jazz the audiences and that sort of thing, as opposed to the same internship at another place where, here you go, sir, here's a paper, thanks, and huddled back into my cube. So definitely interesting where the trajectory will go. I'm 4 years into Cookerly, and I feel like I still have a lot of great work to get to do in this firm. So these are some of the things that I do on an average day basis. You might have heard of the Super Bowl. It was a little slow this year, but for all of us who stuck it out to the end, my client in this case was Mercedes-Benz, and they gave me the following two elements. They said, Ludacris has a small part in our commercial, and the commercial is for the A-Class car, which is a car that you can request to do different things for you, and like a Siri, but with more things. You can say, I'm cold, and it knows to turn the heat on, and things like that. But so they give us those elements sometimes, and we have to make a campaign out of it. So for the Super Bowl, we made a hype video with local school kids from something called the Ron Clark Academy, kids that definitely specialize in choreography and song and dance, and did a welcome to Atlanta. We definitely helped with promoting the Super Bowl ad. A lot of time goes into just promoting that ad, because a lot of marketers spend a lot of money to get that placement on the most watched show of the year, and then you do a lot of, quote, activation around that to be able to get people interested. So we had everything from pop-up stores and malls to social media campaigns to the A-Class even talking to you on Twitter, where you could tweet different things and the A-Class would have different commands, which is always a scary thing to try. So that was pretty fun. And I still remember a couple months ago sitting down with Ludacris, and before he was starting to turn on the Mercedes, I didn't know he was a huge Mercedes fan. I knew he was in a lot of movies with cars, but I'm like, do you know how to run this? He's like, I got it. So was definitely glad to be of no help to Ludacris as we drove into the school to surprise kids with Super Bowl tickets. But this right here is the grid of Pinewood Forest, which is near Pinewood Studios in Fayetteville. That's where I live, about 30 minutes out of Atlanta. And it's basically a new urban planning community that's building an entire town that's got houses, it's got going to have boutique hotels, hotels for the movie stars and crews that are making movies. It's going to have an entire town with a beer garden and a luxury movie theater and all sorts of things. I basically heard about it for about 5 seconds and moved there. And now it's one of my clients as well. As I was driving out this morning, the cast of Zombieland 2 was preparing for filming out in some weird woods nearby. But except for the zombies, the Pinewood Forest is a really cool project to work on. You're going to be hearing a lot about it because next month we're launching a micro home community, which most of us call tiny houses, but the PC word is a micro home community. And it's going to be really cool because they're all on geothermal energy, and they're basically encouraging people to live in the small spaces and get out and enjoy nature more and enjoy the communal qualities of that. It felt new a couple years ago, but now you probably can't go into a restaurant without seeing Coca-Cola's Freestyle device, but that was a great campaign to be able to launch to get people to try out different products. And now that you can buy orange vanilla Coke at the stores, you got to guess that the data and analytics that comes from those machines is telling Coca-Cola what types of new products people are interested in because they're mixing them there, and then now you can sell them at Walmart. But I also, with my movie review site called silverscreencapture.com, I get to go to the Oscars and do that. So it's one of those things where a side job influences my day job and vice versa, where I get ideas from that I bring back to my campaigns. And this is often how you'll see me. You'll see me in rooms with long lists of things on the walls where we're trying to come up with names for something or campaign ideas, and we're evaluating those. And honestly, one of the most fun things in a marketing or ad agency or PR firm is that ideation, where you can just really think blue sky. And no matter what business you're in, they're going to love the person that can think of the new idea. Now, the truth of the matter is the new ideas don't come that often. There's only so many new ideas under the sun, but it is mixing the things you never would have mixed together that makes that new idea. So the key is if you only knew about business, or you only knew about computer programming, or you only knew about accounting, and you didn't ever mix it with something else, you're never going to have that new approach or that new perspective or that empathy with other people's approaches. So one of the biggest encouragements I make, from even mentioning that extracurriculars in college were important, to mentioning that having different kinds of classes you take that might be unexpected, is always going to help you to ideate in companies. And we all want to be seen as people who can think of that next idea, even if that new idea is, wow, our break room's really messy, what can we do to keep it clean? Or, wow, the people want to wear jeans every day and our boss wants us to wear suits. What's a happy medium? So it could be all sorts of things that could ultimately affect your company culture, your product lines, or what have you, and it requires you to know something about something other than business to be able to have any impact on business. All right, so 5 tips for agility in your career. These are not amazing tips, but they're story starters, or a little bit starters, to talk to people from all the different majors that you represent, and to give you a couple ideas. And this is where I may call on you and make it a little interactive. But the first one is to build your personal brand. I would ask if anybody here at any of your stages knows the definition of a brand. I'll probably be very nice about your answer no matter what it is. But does anybody have a definition of what you think a brand is?
Really, characteristics.
Oh, was it the characteristics? And where am I hearing from? I heard way in the back. Hello. So you said the characteristics of an organization or a service or a product company. That is absolutely right. Any other things that you might think of when you hear the word brand? Like you might be into a fashion brand or a restaurant brand. What does that make you think of? Does it make you think of like the look of their logo sometimes and things like that? Yes, sir. Red.
The quality.
The quality of the service? Absolutely. So the brand could make you think that when you experience that brand or go to that brand, that you're going to get a certain level of service, a level of quality. It might be like when you see that Mercedes symbol, that you're going to believe it's going to be a safe and luxurious car. Yes, ma'am.
I would say like a brand is something that distinguishes a product or something from something else.
No, that's great. So that this definition was something that distinguishes your product or service from something else. Those are all accurate. I will say that in my world, there's one easy word that I use with brands, and the brand is what promise you're making to the world. So it's all those things, but we describe the brand as a promise, that when you go to a certain restaurant, you believe that the food is going to taste great, or that it's going to be served hot, well, and if you go to a certain gas station, it's going to be this, you're going to get in quickly, you might get some froyo, whatever else you might get with that brand. So with a brand promise that's made about a company or an organization, you believe certain things, but what about your personal brand? Each of you is coming into the world, we're like, oh, I graduated from so-and-so, and I graduated with something or other, and quite frankly, I remember being in the shoes of like, look, if there's companies hiring, and it's remotely in the universe of what I think I could do, I'm there. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I would say that the more you define what you think you are great at, the more magnetic you and those dream companies are going to be. So I'll explain this just a little bit, that I tell people who are looking to network in the world, to distinguish themselves, as that word came up a couple times, to know what you love. So is anybody here way into sports? Let's just say your biggest passion is sports. Okay, right over here. Good. So knowing that that's a passion outside of work, and then what is your major?
I'm a marketing major.
Marketing and sports. I don't want to guess your personal brand for you, but what if it were, I am as passionate about sports marketing as any person could be. You know, it could be that, it could be other things. But what if I went out into the world and said, I'm as passionate about sports marketing as I possibly could be, and like, who would I want to work for? Well, maybe I'd work for Turner Sports, maybe I'd work for ESPN, maybe I'd like a job working for Disney, owning ESPN and other things. Maybe I'd like to work for sports marketing, maybe I'd like to work for the Hawks, or the Braves, or the United, or the Falcons, or maybe a pro team, or this and that. It certainly helps me make the universe of companies that I'd even consider much more on my radar. And then as someone who's just operationalizing the idea about going to market as a person to try to get those jobs, I'm like, I'm going to set up a Google alert for all those companies I want to work for, and every time they make news, or every time that sports marketing firm gets a new client, I'm going to be the one who says, hey, you got a new client? Do you need some fresh new talent? Because I love sports marketing about as much as someone could, and I'm great at it, and I love it, and would you consider an informational meeting? Would you consider an all-out meeting with me? And all of that. So just saying that the most you can have there about your personal brand, and the most you can define those other companies, you still could maybe be iffy about your brand and iffy about those companies, and you could kind of work for them, and they could kind of be there for a couple years, but if you knew it, and you knew those, and you start making them and try to be magnetic, it becomes a lot easier even to network with other business people. Because, and I know I'm putting tons of words in your mouth about you being a sports marketing expert, but that would be an awesome brand. And because it's like, oh, what do you want to get into? Sports marketing? Awesome. I know somebody over at this. Can I put you in touch with them? And it becomes a lot easier. It becomes easy at the neighborhood cookout to even say what you do, as opposed to like confusing your mom or your grandmother about, yeah, something in business, heaven help him, I hope he's going to be all right, as opposed to like, oh, that one's sharp. He's well into sports marketing, and he's got his eyes set on these companies. So, so personal brand, probably did that to death, but so mine is creative connector. I went through some exercise and determined that this is what my personal brand is all about. So it's exciting for me to even come to schools like this to learn from you, because for me, my creativity is fueled by other people and learning what they're interested in and learning how I can put that to work. So when I mentioned getting the Ron Clark Academy kids to do a Welcome to Atlanta thing for Mercedes, it came from my being in networking organizations with Ron Clark, who ran the school, who does this. I was magnetically attracted to the types of things that were schools for the arts and so. So when we're coming up with like, well, how can we do a hype video or something that doesn't require us having to pay a huge performer this and this? I'm like, why don't we make a donation to this school and see if we can involve their students in writing their own song and making a great statement, and it's good for the city, it's good for them, it puts them on the map, puts us on the map, and so it was actually a really easy creative connection to make. Sometimes the creative connections are even weirder than that. Last year, I worked with Serenbe Playhouse, which is in Palmetto, Georgia, and we built the Titanic and sunk it every night as part of a play. So sometimes it's just for fun, but sometimes, but oddly enough, the people that we worked on with that, we're working on something else that's sort of a program that's about to be announced that you'll hear about as well. So if you, and oddly enough, it was a theater company that got mentioned in Fast Company magazine for their crazy Titanic built with Georgia Tech engineering students. So definitely the innovation can come from lots of places. Building my personal brand means that I go on panels. This was one recently from Social Media Week where we're talking about virtual reality, and then even building out one's own LinkedIn, because as you know, your LinkedIn is basically your resume that everybody's going to learn about you. For better or worse, it's got things in there that are about my campaigns or people we've connected to. Even obvious that my 4 collaborators on McDonald's projects are up there, because it's not about me, it's about who I can rope into working with me on a great project together. Any questions about personal brand? I know that's a lot, but I've gone to like 5-hour workshops just about that, so that's definitely a big thing. Yes, sir?
What are some of the best ways to build your personal brand?
It's a great question. Well, one of them is just to treat everybody the way one with that brand would want to be treated. And that's always treat everybody awesomely. I'll just tell you that, that's a baseline. But if, for instance, you knew that you wanted to be someone who was the small business whisperer, because I think I've always got tips to get small business people to be able to grow their so-and-so. Or what if my brand were being able to be the person who is helping every kind of startup to be able to multiply and go public. So I basically would start studying that, doing it in small ways, maybe even doing it with nonprofits on the side. And the more you do it and practice it, the more it becomes real. So that someone 10 years in their career who's done it a couple times can more definitively say it's our personal brand. And I don't want to scare people about your personal brand. You may not know what it is. You're like, look, my personal brand is I graduated. You know, it's like, and that is totally fine too. But add that one element, and I promise you, it's going to make you stand out from the other 20 to 100 to 300 candidates that interviewed for that exact job. So that's the reason you want to do it. But yeah, so you want to practice it in everything you do, in person, online, what have you. So my second tip is to stay smart and sharp through intellectual curiosity. That's sort of a scary phrase that gets bandied about in our job interview discussions. And we're like, wow, I really wish that young lady that majored in PR was interested in something other than just PR. And so that gets to the idea about like, wow, you can be passionate about your social analytics, you can be certified in your Google Analytics, and yet if I am interviewing somebody for an analytics role and she also has interest in beekeeping or zoology or something, and I'm like, wow, she's going to be able to talk about how the different hives work together to be able to make an ecosystem that's helping social media to flourish, and all of a sudden she's taking things and blowing my mind, as opposed to somebody who's like, yes, to do a Google AdWord, you put this in here and this in here and this in here. And I'm like, okay, that's also true and that's also good. But it's those ones that have that intellectual curiosity that will definitely make your minds blow in business. And to that front, we'd like to keep it fresh. I was mentioning Brainstorms earlier, and one of the ways to stay fresh in companies or in your group projects or anything is to have great brainstorms. And brainstorms is sort of that chance to have blue sky thinking about anything, but it's blue sky thinking with a purpose, and it's blue sky thinking with certain rules. And one of the rules of the brainstorm is there's no bad idea in a brainstorm. So even if you don't like an idea, you're like, yeah, that idea, let's add to that idea this. So it's always yes and. It's never but or no or that's not going to work. You take every idea, and just like an improv class, you take everything, you're like yes and then take it to the next level. So everything is good in the brainstorm. And that's where you fill the walls with ideas, you get them all out there. You don't go deep into any of them, because the moment you go deep into them, you start figuring out why they wouldn't work. So you want to just stay really high level, because that high level idea can prompt prompt the next person who's thinking even faster than you to be like, yes, not only can we do that on the moon, but what if we involve the entire Milky Way in this? And I was like, awesome. And then later on, you have something called a harvesting session where you evaluate the ideas. And you're like, that whole thing about the constellations and the thing where we're going to do it on the moon, that might have been a little crazy, but what if we scale that down and just do that in Boise, Idaho? And I was like, oh, yeah, we could do a smaller version of that, not on the planet, but just here. And so there's always a way to make the ideas work if they're good ideas. There's always ways to scale them down. You could take $1 million idea and probably still do it for $10 or $15 in some way and make it real virtual. So just always keeping that in mind. Some of the ways to keep brainstorms fresh are not just to do them inside. This is a brainstorm we did in England recently. We were helping the British Lottery, because of course the British Lottery would call Stephen in Atlanta and say, could you come out and lead an outdoor brainstorm for us? But we were wandering through forests and tunnels to be able to come up with certain names for a new product. And so once we realized that we'd sort of exhausted ourselves in the room, that every Powerade and Gatorade and granola bar and sugar and pixie sticks had made us just completely deplete the sugar brainstorm, I was like, okay, now let's just go out and get nourished by nature. Let's go out, let's see what we see. And we had somebody taking notes and writing down like, that particular squirrel that just ran by is making me think of something. And all of a sudden, that squirrel that wouldn't have been in your brainstorm is all of a sudden storing for the winter in the way that our ideas needed to. So super random, of course, but definitely putting yourself out there in feelings that aren't just in a business room, but taking yourself to, for instance, your client sites. We love for clients like a UPS to ride on the vehicles. We like for clients like McDonald's to literally be in the store, and we work a drive-through once a quarter to be able to really understand what it's like to be able to try this new product out and get it in people's hands. Okay, so a third tip, leverage your network and the talents of others. So this is one that works out really well for me. But one of the things that I've noticed about our lives today is this is what we feel like most of the time is networking. We are swiping our phones, we are answering, we are starting relationships, and all these ways while we're looking at our little devices, which is awesome, and it's made our lives easier and more richly globally interconnected. The scary thing for us is business has often been about networking a room. It's been working a room and going in and nailing that interview and looking really professional, or nailing that conversation, or being able to go to a group interview and keep all of them interested and that sort of thing. So one of the things I challenge people to do is walk into this nightmare right here and do it well. So this would be, for instance, a Chamber of Commerce meeting, or an alumni reception, or a breakfast meeting of the group in town that's all computer engineers, or so-and-so types of folks. And I want to walk you through what it could feel like to walk into a room like that and have some of the answers. So let's imagine you walked in there, you don't know anybody. And that's the way I was in Atlanta, by the way. I moved to Atlanta, I didn't know anybody. And then you start finding out that you did actually know a few people, but I thought I knew no one. But you walk into this room, well, you don't want to go in cold. You want to research the event in advance. What if you went into a networking event and knew the people's names already before they even did? What if you could be this omnipotent person that just sort of knew what you're walking into, and you're like, this is no biggie. I'm walking into a computer meeting, and there'll be a Twitter person, there'll be a Google person, there'll be somebody who's the research expert at TSIS, and there'll be the Synovus expert, and there'll be all these people all in the room, and I don't want to meet them all. So I go in, I research the event. Two, I travel light. You don't want to have too much on you. You don't want to have too much gear. You just want to sort of have you, and you in the zone, maybe a pack of business cards in your pocket, something that you could hand to make sure that if you meet somebody, you don't forget them later. You want to walk the walk. Half of it's just about being confident. You don't have to actually be confident to look confident in an environment like this, but just walk like you want to be there. And even though you might be scared to death about being there because you don't know anyone. 4, start with breakfast. So if there's food, super easy. Just go over and get the coffee or so-and-so. There's always going to be people gathered around that, and there's always super small talk to be able to be made around a coffee machine, or about the pastries, or like, wow, I had no idea they'd have this much food for us this morning, or wow, they said it was a continental breakfast. I don't know what continent this was, but that was not really very good. So who's who, number 5. Circle the room and scope out name tags. Maybe there's folks that you already knew were going to be there, and you sort of see those name tags or see those folks even clustered together in little groups that you don't want to intercept. But just sort of scope the room to know. And then number 6 is approach the VIPs, especially if they're going to speak, or if they're going to be a part of something, or if they look like they're about ready to cluster up. Take a chance, like, hey, I know you're a busy man, busy woman. I just wanted to say, hey, I'm about to graduate from school, I'm a passionate man about sports marketing, all about town. And I just thought I would want to say, hey, and remember me when the time comes, when I'm your boss. So approach them and just be able to say nice, or say you look forward to their speech. It could be really, really benign. I look forward to hearing you talk. I look forward to coming to more of these receptions and getting to know you all. And there will be a certain percentage of nice people that will be glad that you did that. Spot the lone wolves, though, number 7. This is sort of a double-edged sword, because the person who's sort of there standing in the corner alone, like, that is like if you definitely need a crutch, where it's like, okay, that person's not talking to anybody, I might go over and stand with them too, like scoping out the room as well. What happens sometimes for me is, unfortunately, that person like grasps on, and like all of a sudden that lone wolf is becoming my conjoined twin, and it's like, oh, okay, well, good to know you earlier in the reception, but now I'm kind of moving on. But definitely that lone wolf is somebody who you'll remember that together, and it's somebody to talk to in the room. And who knows, that lone wolf could be that really reclusive CEO that's standing in the back that doesn't know anybody either. 8, and you are, connect with people about their interests in their lives. As much as we're all business majors and variants of that, they're going to be interested in what's going on in the weather, or sports, or movies, or other things that are going on in life, what's going on in the neighborhood, where you're from, and that sort of thing. So always easy ways to have that talk. Definitely shaking hands. The kids at Ron Clark Academy taught me this. I didn't know this until last year, that it's 2 firm handshakes. I'm like, I didn't know there were 2. So it's like 2 handshake pumps. Don't have to do that, but a firm handshake. Two firm pumps is better than just sort of like a hand that's sort of going out. Number 10, feel them out, open-ended questions. Not talking about yourself. You might know your personal brand, but this isn't the time to just exclaim it to the world. Ask them about themselves first. You know they're going to be interested in that topic. And then you can kind of lunge in with like, oh, that's interesting that you do that. For me, is interested you're into sailing. For me, writing rap music is my thing. And it's like, oh, explain that. And then all of a sudden you've got sailboats and rap music and life is good. 11, card exchange. If you have them or don't have them as a about to be graduate, it's good to have them. And it's good to be able to have something and your personal brand can go on it. So a really easy thing. Instead of it just saying graduate 2019, it's one extra thing that they'll be like, oh, that was that major sports guy. Number 12, get an introduction. See if the moderator or panelist would introduce you to somebody. It's like, oh, you're about to, to introduce this. I saw that you're the reporter at the so-and-so paper. Would you mind? He looks like he's really busy. Do you think it'd be a chance I could cut in a second and say hey to him? And usually someone will help if you're asking really nicely like that. Give and take, always try to be that connector. And then it's a wrap. Sometimes at work we have a little contest to see who can follow up the fastest with people if we have a lot of business cards. So we like to go into these, come back with like 30. It's like we're putting them out like they're baseball cards and figuring out like, oh, going to follow up with this person, let them know this, follow up with this person. Like maybe these 2 are the only ones that were really critical. A nice one for everybody else, but then those 2 we've swiped. Is it swiping right or left if it's a good? We're going to swipe those cards to the correct side, and we're going to follow up and ask those people if they could have a follow-up coffee or if we could ever stop by their office to learn more. And I always think when I'm asking business people to something, I try to make it as easy for them. Like, hey, could I ever bring you by coffee at your office and chat for 10 minutes or so? Instead of like, would you meet me at Starbucks and I live across town? And I have people that do that all the time where they're like, I'd love to pick your brains and I'd love to do that 3 hours away from where you live. So try to make it really easy for them, and you'll get a lot of yeses. So that's sort of the short answer to networking, but doing it live and in person is the way to build your network up really fast for real people that you'd know. And I'm always having people ask me about my LinkedIn. They're like, oh, you know so-and-so. I'm like, well, I know them on LinkedIn. But it's the people that I probably know in real life that are likely to give me business or to be collaborators. There are also people who I've just met on LinkedIn, and those have been good too, but this is very helpful in business. Consider your job description just the baseline. So I'm having people all the time that are showing me their resumes, and they're like, you know what? I have been working my way through college, and I did not have time to be doing this internship yet. I'm a host stand at the restaurant, and that is all I'm doing to keep ends meet, and I still have student loans and all that. I'm like, all that is good. Slow your roll. This is what you need to say about that host job. You need to actually tell me how that's relevant to business. Because if you are being a host that long in a day, and you hadn't figured out some way to make it relevant to business, and you haven't been able to tell me how the teamwork you're mobilizing while you're the host, or the special events that you're doing, or the fact that in your spare time there you're helping the general manager to calculate the accounting derivatives about this and this, then you're not making the full time there matter. So all of a sudden you went from being a host stand person at that to being a business consultant or business associate for part of your time there. And some people who would just put 6 bullets under host stand at Applebee's all of a sudden have, wait on people when they walk in, walk people to their seats. I was like, well, I know that's what the host does, but what if I was like, wow, interestingly enough, at Applebee's, I became so relevant to them that they asked me if that could help the district manager to do this and that, and then I'm clocking in for the same things, and I'm actually doing things that are related to my career, and then all of a sudden the corporate office hears me and is like, wow, there's this wunderkind expert that's in, so-and-so city, and they've advanced the ranks all the way up. So talking about your job description is never what you want to do. You want to talk about the outcomes you're making in that job, even on the most modest jobs as you're working your way up. You want to look for those business outcomes, and you want to lead with those. And probably 9 out of 10 resumes I see just start talking about what they did. It was like they had hi, I want to be a marketing analyst, and that job description was written on the job description. They got the role, and they cut and paste that job description, and they just put it into the resume. And I was like, wow, I know that's what they needed for you to do, but is that what you need to advance yourself? So I say, do those things in your sleep. Hopefully the job you take, you can do a lot of those things pretty briskly and well, and you can take on the next thing. Because that next thing is going to be your promotion, and that next thing is going to be something better than what that was. Because I've rarely seen it when the job interview is for a position that's the dream job. I've got to get it. It's like, well, I would do that. So get the job, do it well, and while you're doing it, do better stuff, get more outcomes, and you'll be on to the next. So I was mentioning at McDonald's, we launched Uber Eats for McDonald's, and part of that was actually stepping out and practicing the logistics of it. Now, I won't say that on my resume it doesn't say that I actually drove some of the Uber Eats cars to be able to get it there, but truly by doing it, I learned some different logistics patterns, fed those to Uber, and it actually affected the way we do business in Atlanta for that. So it was like, wow, that guy from the PR firm, I wasn't expecting him to know this and that about that. It was great that he got publicity about this and did that, but wow, by working the logistic and the supply chain system, actually found some tips that actually helped the whole program to be better, and lo and behold, we won some awards for it. And sometimes that extracurricular stuff can be really crazy. This is a picture of going to Japan, and it was like, hey, this little media thing he's come up with is something that could be interesting along other parts of the globe. And it's like, wow, that wasn't something my business asked me to do, to create that little media pyramid, but all of a sudden, folks in Japan are doing it, and that was just a side thing that was not in my job description. Make a media pyramid that explains media infrastructure to Asian markets. So that's where it can be fun. Or training Home Depot aproned employees to be able to talk on TV. And it's like, wow, all of a sudden we were wanting to make sure that when a hurricane is coming or so-and-so, that we're preparing those folks to be able to be your spokespeople on a dime, instead of having folks from support center headquarters have to do it every time. And so all of a sudden we were putting ourselves into a media training program, and for us, we made an entire business for ourselves of media training, where thousands and thousands of people from Best Buy blue shirts to apron employees at Home Depot are basically talking the same message about their company because of our training. And so we created a multi-million-dollar training offering just based on learning that, wow, if we did that a little bit more, it would save the executives time, and we've got really smart people on the ground level at stores to do that. So my final tip here is always be prepared to step up. And I know I probably say this to folks that already feel exhausted by your classwork and your jobs and your families and everything else, but in business it is all about the hustle. And it's going to be, no one has ever minded that person that was hustling. Like, that person who's hustling, I really wish they would step down. Actually, my boss did tell me recently, she's like, Stephen, as you make more executive decisions, I want you to be more deliberate. And it's like, don't just jump to the answer or your gut instinct all the time. And I felt like saying, well, that wasn't my gut instinct. It was based on 20-something years of gut instincts and what has actually happened. But sometimes what you say can matter a lot. And for instance, saying something is fantastic when it was actually just okay is not the right answer. Sometimes you give more by saying like, that was a good start, but let me tell you some critiques on it that can help us make that process improve for next time. So whereas I might just be trying to move paper along, move things along, move people along, it's like, oh, that's fantastic, bye. And I was like, oh, okay, no, actually, that was that. Let me step back and tell you some process improvements that will help us to step that up to the next level. For me, I'm always just trying to step up into learning new things. One area that I didn't know anything about and then learned a lot about was sustainability. I worked a lot with Interface Floor, which isn't too far from here in LaGrange, and we helped align their different global communications offices to announce the company's desire to have no impact on the earth by a certain point in our next decade. And for me, I learned about that. It got me into other forestry clients. It got me into some accounts now where we're trying to get people to use aluminum bottles instead of plastic bottles for certain types of products that are going to be better for the earth, so whales won't die with plastic in their bellies. Sometimes stepping up into an area that you wouldn't have expected, because I wouldn't have seen myself as a sustainability expert, but then all of a sudden I'm learning enough about it and I could get rid of my Creative Connector brand and I could just be like, you know what? Boom. Hi, everybody. I'm Stephen Brown, and I'm a sustainability so-and-so. And it wouldn't be faking it. It would be based on a lot of work, but it's also like stepping into those areas where something is a critical moment in time that you can tell companies are focused on, where you could actually use your advice and your business smarts to do it. If people 20 years ago had said, social media is not really going to take off, and didn't step into it, then they were going to sort of be just living in the suburbs at my age and not doing anything new, and they weren't going to be able to get into basically where the game completely is in communications. So I just urge folks to step up and into every opportunity they can, whether it's fake hosting today's show or talking about, for real, about forestry trends. So those are my tips. To build your personal brand, be intellectually curious, leverage your network and the talents of others, because it's never just about you, it's about what you can do with the world around you of people you know. Consider your job description just the baseline of what you do for your resume or for your personal satisfaction, and then always be prepared to step up. Step into new categories, step into new areas, say, you know what, this might not look like a moneymaker now, but let me run the numbers on this. Let me run this because I think by next year, all the men at the Oscars are going to be wearing velvet. I'm just guessing it, It's like all of a sudden we want our clothing line to be velvet all the way. It may not be that one, but it may be something like that where you're going to be, I was the trend maker that made that happen, and you're going to be glad it's going to make you money. So at that point, if I haven't gone on too terribly long, I kind of did. I'm definitely open to any questions anybody has, and I just thank you all so much for coming in on a sunny day to listen to some marketing and trend tips. If any questions now, otherwise I'll hang around and can definitely talk to anybody personally. I'll be that lone wolf, but thank you all so much for your time, and appreciate your attention and letting me call on some of you.